I had enough. I had a rough year. You know, one of those years where everything just seemed to go wrong. Everything from the biggest things to the small things. Stuff you wouldn't even think of. I was feeling beyond stressed, and I was starting to feel the sting of life. I was fed up, and I felt like I was about to lose it. I had to get away. There was a forest retreat I went to quite a bit in my life growing up. Even visited the place often in my adult years, and I decided to go there for a while. I had to get away from everything. The city life, my normal routine. I just wanted to be with my thoughts for a while. I got there and immediately started to roam the forest. It was peaceful, although it wasn't enough for me to get away from my anger. I would often get up and walk through the woods. No destination involved, just walking. It didn't matter any time of the day or night. I often found myself sitting on a log in the woods in the middle of the night, smoking a cigarette. Most people would be afraid to sit in the total, complete darkness of the woods by themselves, but I wasn't, and honestly, I was at such a point that I really didn't care. On one such night, I was sitting on a log, puffing a cigarette, planning my next moves. I had to change things, when I heard a slight giggle and rustle in the woods. I looked up, but I didn't see anyone. I went back to smoking my cigarette, and then within a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it was closer. It repeated. Although I myself was out here, anyone out in the middle of the woods at this time of night was not at all safe. I decided to investigate. The laughter continued, and I followed. Through the brush, with the little moonlight that shone through the trees, I could see a figure dashing in and out of the forest. What the hell? I thought. As I inched closer and closer, I could tell that the figure was wearing a robe. I followed until I lost sight of it. I stood there in the darkness of the forest, confused and without direction, still searching for this figure. It was silent for a moment. Only the chirping of crickets, the hooting of owls, and sounds of forest night life persisted. Again, I heard the laughter. I followed the sound and came into a clearing. Up ahead was a large wooden cabin. I stepped into the clearing, just in enough time to see the figure disappear into the front door. I followed. I walked up to the door. Placing an ear against it, I listened. I heard nothing. I stepped back and decided to try the door. Twisting the knob ever so gently, it opened. Stepping into the dark cabin, the aroma of recently burnt firewood hit my nose. It was a favorable smell, one that I had grown to love. It made me a little comfortable. At least I knew someone was here. I stepped in further, hearing nothing but my footsteps on the wooden floor. It was obvious this figure wanted me to follow them, and I perceived it was a girl. It wasn't just my curiosity that was getting to me. I just couldn't sit well knowing a girl was roaming around this forest at night. Whether she felt comfortable enough to do it or not, it just wasn't safe. I wanted to be sure of what this girl's situation was. Maybe she was with some people here nearby, or maybe it was just some group of teens here hopped up off drugs out here running around. Either way, I wanted to find out. Especially if it was the latter. That especially wasn't safe. As I rounded a corner, I saw the robe flitter behind a wall. I walked over. To the left of the wall, the robed figure disappeared behind was a stairwell. And again, I saw in just enough time the robed figure disappear into the door at the bottom. I proceeded down the stairs. Now, you may ask why, but in a few moments, you'll see why. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, through the doorway, I could see a pretty young girl standing across the way. Her hands were placed one over the other at her waist, and she was just standing there, smiling. I stepped into the large hall. Wooden torches lined the walls all around and lit up the place. As I began to approach the girl, I heard the door slam behind me. I turned to find two average-built men standing on either side of it. "Welcome, friend," a voice called out from where I was looking before. Coming out of a corridor behind the girl was a robed and hooded man. He proceeded forward and stood next to the girl. From corridors around the circular hall, the hooded figures began to emerge. I felt a shove from behind me as one of the men ushered me further into the hall. "The fuck is this?" I said calmly. "This is your night." "What do you mean, my night? Why are you all dressed up like Catholics standing down here in this cold hall? Tonight, you will be our sacrifice to him." "Him? Who would this him be?" "We are the cult of Vorhees. In a moment, we will let you out and back into the woods, and then we will hunt you." They all produced weapons: knives, swords, axes, sticks, and I noticed one person even had a gun. A table and chairs were brought out and placed in the center of the room. Hanging on the side of their belts against their robes, I noticed all of them had these masks, these like hockey masks. It looked like something I'd seen before, but with the robes on and everything, it just kind of looked out of place. I smirked. "You're gonna let me back out of this cabin, and you're going to hunt me?" "Yes. Oh, you definitely got the right one tonight. For the last 3 decades, we have honored the tradition of him. Every year on this night, this his special night, Friday the 13th, we honor him by doing what he did. We honor him with the hunt." Before he could finish his sentence, I caught him with a quick right and left. Oh! He fell to the ground, slid across the floor, and hit the wall. He looked up, holding his cheek. The look on his face was no less than utter disbelief. I looked across the room, and all of them were standing there, wide-eyed, mouths open, frozen in shock. See, I peeped these people when they walked into the room. I know these kind of people. They don't have any real power or control. They use fear to control. They've been hunting people for years, and they count on someone being paralyzed in fear seeing their weapons, numbers, and this creepy atmosphere. Nuh-uh, not me. I reached for the next robed person closest to me and picked him up and slammed him hard into the cement floor, head first. Blood splattered everywhere. The crowd of cult members gasped. I grabbed a chair, bashed it against another. They dropped their stick, and immediately I commenced to pick it up and beat that person to a bloody pulp. The cult couldn't believe what they were seeing, and all screamed in panic and bolted for the door. I quickly caught hold of the one holding the gun, slammed him into the ground, and beat his head into the ground until his brains came out the back. The cult leader was still lying on the floor, looking on in shock. When we locked eyes, he too bolted for the door. After I beat the other guy's head into the ground a few more times to make sure the job was done, I grabbed the gun, a sword left behind, a knife, and a piece of the broken chair, and chased after him. When I exited the cabin, I could see the cult members scurrying, screaming, and panicking. They were running for their lives. The cult leader disappeared into the forest too. "Where are you going? I thought we were hunting!" I screamed. I dashed off into the forest, weapons in hand. I was pursuing the cult leader, but opportunity led me to another cult member. She saw me following and fled through the trees. I caught up with her, grabbed the back of her robe to stop her in her tracks, and hacked away with the sword. She died in a gurgling of blood. Back off into the forest I went. I saw another cult member running blindly through the forest. His shadow was heading my way. I positioned myself behind a tree and timed it perfectly. Ooh, home run. I swung the chair leg and it landed square against his face so hard he left his feet. I looked down and his face was sunken in, eyes still open. Even still, I beat his head until it exploded. One by one, I hunted them down. Another I found running, and quickly relieved them of their legs with a quick swipe of the sword. Then I relieved them of their arms, their upper head, and their guts. The young lady that led me to the cabin, oh, she got something special. First, I caught her with the sword. Then I caught her with the chair bat. I gutted her with the knife. And I sat there for a minute. I was tired. I smoked and finished a cigarette. Then I continued with the sword, standing over her and stabbing down on her fast like I was tilling soil. I didn't stop until the fingers stopped twitching. Screams and cries of pain were the call from the night, but not from whom they thought it was going to be. I hunted them all down, my entire body and clothes drenched in blood. And oh yes, I did eventually catch up with the cult leader.
You'll never make it out of here alive. We've been doing this for years.
You got the right one tonight. Yeah, ain't gonna be no sacrifice for Mr. Vorhees this year. Unless you all count. I screamed back.
I will see your head on his table before this night ends.
He threatened.
You just keep giving me ideas.
I shot back. He tried to flee through the woods, but he was slow and I was angry. As he ran a few feet ahead of me, I took out the gun, took aim, and shot him right in the calf muscle.
You are no one.
Yeah.
You are nothing.
He fell to the ground screaming and cursing, yelling out in pain and still threatening me.
Kill you.
I walked over to him and stood over him.
You will never.
I shot him in the leg.
We are the cult. We are all powerful.
Ow. I shot him in the arm.
We receive our power from him. We are all power.
I shot him in the other leg. I thought this guy was not going to get it.
Stop! 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 Damn it!
I squatted over him. So now you know what it feels like to be hunted. Is this what makes Mr. Vorhees happy? Does it make you feel good? It should. If an action feels good, it should feel good on either side of the action, right?
No, it doesn't,
he said, panting in pain. I didn't think so, and this isn't either. I took the sword, placed it under his chin, and as slow as I could, I pushed it into his head. But I stopped far enough that it wouldn't kill him. I then felt around his side for his liver. I wanted to make sure I missed his lungs. Didn't want him to die prematurely. I placed the sword on his side, and I repeated the slow as I can motion. When I got to his leg, he tried to reach up with his one good arm to stop me, so I chopped it off. I repeated this over his entire body for a long, good portion of the night. And when I was done, I placed the sword tip on his forehead and repeated the motion, this time going all the way through. I told you, I had had enough. If only they had known better than to mess with someone who had reached a point, a limit. I didn't know if there is more of this cult somewhere out there, so I rounded up all their bodies and placed their heads on the Vorhees table in the basement hall of that cabin as a warning. Hopefully, it will deter them from doing this again. I know what you all are going to ask next. Am I now going to turn into them? Enjoy hunting men? You know, they say once you get the taste for hunting men, you never lose it. Nah, I think that's bullshit. The only pleasure I got from hunting them was making sure they could never hunt anyone else ever again. You know what? Maybe I'll come back here again next year. Narrated by Dorsey Jackson of Dorsey Jackson Global at Compound City. Be sure to like and subscribe.